We shall fight in the field.
Mit der Akzeptanz der
C'est pas parce que les
vier
Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas être
Freizügigkeit der
associés à ce
Personen.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.
Hello and welcome to another Brexitometer brought to you by the Martin Center, finally joining you from outside of the EU. You can practically smell the fragrance of freedom, sovereignty and independence in this country that finally managed to get Brexit done. I'm no fan of Brexit myself, but I must say that me, as well as lots of other people around me, probably feel a bit happy that finally all the craziness of the last few months and years about Brexit has finally subsided a bit. Today we're joining you from a train station, Marylebone train station here in London, and the reason is that one of the big political debates in London over the last few days is about trains. We're going to see how that matters about Brexit and what does it tell us about the UK and its future relationship with the EU. So, how does a non-EU member state spend its time these days? What can we learn about the EU's new neighbour across the channel? The brand new Independence Brexitometer is here to give you all the answers. The first big decision of the Boris Johnson government after the election was paradoxically about trains, something quite mundane, but it's actually quite political here in the UK. It was his decision to authorize the so-called HS2, High Speed 2, a super fast train project whereby trains will be leaving stations like this one from London, connecting London to the north of England. It's a pretty political project. It's been around for many years. People say that it costs too much, and quite importantly, there's a lot of people in the Conservative Party who don't like the idea of the government spending too much money. The Conservative Party, after all, is the party of fiscal responsibility. So what is the government up to? Why has it now decided to approve this project, and what does it mean for Brexit? The first reason is, of course, that the government has won a majority thanks to its new votes and its new seats up north. Working class areas that used to vote for Labour but supported Brexit and support the idea of the government taking control. It's Boris Johnson's new blue wall, and he wants to reward it by creating a high-speed connection with London. But the second important thing about it, and I think what's really more important if we think about it from the perspective of Brexit, is that this new project symbolizes a new approach of the government. You can call it the Trump approach, the builder approach. So it's a pretty big symbolic decision of the Boris Johnson government that it is in control, that it is quite voluntary in doing things, and I think that shows quite a signal about the approach it's going to have about the EU negotiations in the coming months. The second major political development in London the past few days was a government reshuffle that resulted quite unexpectedly in the change of the Chancellor, what in the UK you call the Finance Minister. Sajid Javid is out and a new fresh face, Rishi Sunak, is in. Now this is important again quite symbolically, because now for the first time since the referendum in 2016, all the top 4 ministers of government are people who supported Leave in the 2016 referendum campaign. The Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, the Home Minister and now the Finance Minister. But again, it's also quite important in terms of practicalities, in practice, what it means for policy. Everybody perceives this change as basically a power game, a power grab by Boris Johnson and his advisor Dominic Cummings over the Finance Minister. The way things usually work in the UK is that the government wants to spend things and the Finance Minister always says no, but there's not enough money, we have to control public spending. And what that means is that now that the Finance Minister is under tighter control by Downing Street, by Boris Johnson, again, we should expect the government to be more able to be spending money, to be using on public spending, public investment, public infrastructure, and more borrowing. Why this matters for Brexit? It means that the government is creating more leeway for itself, potentially to be using money as investment to offset any disruptions of a hard Brexit. So this is something to watch. What the Finance Minister does will determine quite a lot the breathing space the government has in its Brexit negotiations as well. So what about the actual Brexit itself? What we had over the past few days is basically the two sides laying down their mandates, showing where they are, and of course it's quite normal that in a negotiation both sides start far apart as they present the full menu of what they want. But in this particular case, it's fair to say that they appear to be starting the negotiation quite far apart from each other. Michel Barnier presented the EU argument that if the UK wants full or good access into the EU common market, it will have to be adhering to all EU rules and regulations, including on industrial and competition policy. Whereas the British government appears very willing to actually favor independence over access, and it will make a big deal out of even small, economically small, but politically quite symbolical issues such as fisheries. So where are we now? What does the British government really want? For me, the most important indication of what the government wants and what the government means was when a couple of weeks ago, Michael Gove, one of the government ministers and a key Boris Johnson ally and one of the masterminds behind Brexit, spoke to some business associations and clearly told them that they should not count on access to the single market. They should not count on the UK economy staying close to the EU economy after December 31st. And to me, that's the clearest indication that the government really means what it says, that if it has to choose between access and control, between access and independence, it will be choosing independence. So this isn't the Theresa May government that really tried hard to minimize economic disruption every step of the way. The current lot mean what they say, and the EU should be ready to play hardball with a pretty decisive and pretty decided UK government. So that was our first free, sovereign, independent Brexitometer, fully in control of our fates, finally, outside of the EU, trying to slowly understand what's going on in the UK. It's quite important. If the UK is not in the EU, we will really start seeing it as a different actor, an actor who's making decisions on its own, decisions that it will not be necessarily be sharing with the rest of the EU. I think what we see, the first steps of the government, of course things can change a lot down the line, but the first steps of the government really show a mentality and an attitude about turning inward, about using national tools to achieve national goals, trying to fortify the country against any disruption of Brexit. And quite importantly, as I said before, I think they really mean it this time. I think the government appears quite set on creating a clean break with the EU. So it's quite important on the EU side to slowly start realizing that and perhaps showing some realism in its negotiations as well. The Brexitometer will of course always be here in London, trying to transmit to you the air of independence. As always, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter using the hashtag Brexitometer, and send me your questions about what goes on in the EU's new neighbor. Until next time, take care.
We shall fight in the field.
Mit der Akzeptanz der
C'est pas parce que les
vier
Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas
Freizügigkeit
être
der
associés à ce
Person.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.